At the annual company gala, Victoria Lynch's new male assistant suddenly proposed to her. The big screen behind him showed a slideshow of them skiing, waiting for a sunrise and bungee jumping. The room erupted in cheers. Say yes, say yes. The camera panned across the crowd. Victoria's brow was furrowed, her expression dark. I was sitting right next to her and joined the chant. Say yes, honey. The moment the words left my lips, Victoria's already sour mood turned black. But the camera was still on her. As she stood up, she had to turn her back to the camera, hissing in my ear, Leo, don't even think about a divorce. Then she smoothed her gown and walked toward the stage. The assistant's eyes lit up when he saw her coming. This public proposal was premeditated. I'd known about it for a while. I thought this guy might actually mean more to Victoria. But I was once again disappointed. When Victoria reached the stage, she gently closed the lid of the ring box he was holding. She frowned and glanced at the big screen behind them. The shot of them waiting for a sunrise together was beautiful and warm. But at Victoria's signal, the screen went black. The assistant's eyes were already welling up. He looked at Victoria, full of hope. Will you marry me? Victoria let out a soft laugh, but her words were ice cold. Ethan, you shouldn't have done this on your own. I told you there was never going to be anything between us. Ethan's gaze instantly shot in my direction. Victoria sadly shifted, blocking his line of sight. A tear finally slid down Ethan's cheek, his voice cracking. Victoria gently pulled him into a hug. She whispered something, and the young man's tears turned into a smile. Victoria led him off the stage. The gala continued, but the dramatic scene had already become the night's main topic of conversation. I heard people behind me whispering, "Why didn't Ms. Lynch say yes? They seemed so good together." I really thought he was going to be the one to finally lock it down. Pretty ballsy, though, proposing at an event like this. I heard from some of the older employees that Ms. Lynch used to wear a wedding ring. You don't think she's already married? Do you? They all looked at each other. Someone tapped the back of my chair. Mr. Grant, you've been with the company for years. You must know Ms. Lynch better than anyone, right? I tried to pull my lips into a smile. All I managed was a grimace. I don't know her that well. Once I thought I knew Victoria very well. But then I found the photos of my brother she treasured in her study. That's when I realized I was just a stand-in, a face she kept around because I looked like him. We had a huge fight. Consumed by anger and hatred, I grabbed a knife and threatened to destroy this face. But Victoria just said calmly, "If you're not afraid of the pain, go ahead. I have plenty of ways to get it fixed." She always knew I was afraid of pain. Pain is what I'm most afraid of. The feeling of the kidnapper's knife, slicing slowly across my thigh, even after all these years, is still fresh in my mind. Just thinking about it now brings a phantom ache. Ignoring my coworkers' still burning curiosity, I grabbed my bag and slipped away. As I turned a corner, I could faintly hear intimate sounds. I flushed with embarrassment. I was about to take another route when I heard a familiar voice. "Who put you up to this today?" Victoria's voice was so cold it was almost cruel. Ethan must have heard the fury in it too, because his voice trembled. I just wanted a commitment. Mr. Grant said he was willing to step aside for me. Victoria es nerev. She gripped Ethan's chin, studying his face. "Didn't I tell you from the beginning that this was going nowhere? You shouldn't have gotten greedy." Ethan looked at her timidly. I thought Mr. Grant was the one unwilling to get a divorce, so I wanted to try and persuade him. I never expected him to agree so readily. Victoria's tone was dripping with sarcasm. "Do you know why he's Mr. Grant? Because he's always so generous." Ethan stared at her, confused. Victoria had lost her patience and turned to leave. Caught off guard, I had no time to hide. Our eyes met. Victoria took a few steps and stopped in front of me. "Enjoying the show, Mr. Grant? In such a hurry to leave?" I nodded, my face a mask. "Ms. Lynch," I said. At the office, Victoria and I always used these formal titles. It's why, after years of marriage, no one ever connected the two of us. Ethan shot me a wounded look from the side. He tugged on Victoria's sleeve. "If you won't marry me, can you at least wear the ring?" I spent so long picking it out. Victoria took the ring box from his hand. She opened it and glanced inside. It's beautiful. Don't you think, Mr. Grant? I cursed her silently, desperate to get out of there. Victoria took the ring out of the box and, with a flick of her wrist, tossed it into a nearby trash can. It landed with a clatter. The move was identical to what I'd done years ago. His face went pale, and his whole body started to shake. I'll reimburse you for the ring. Don't bother coming in tomorrow. With that, Victoria turned and left, not giving the stunned Ethan another glance. I also turned to go, but Ethan suddenly grabbed my arm. The pitiful look on his face was gone. He glared at me, his expression full of resentment. You did this on purpose, didn't you? You knew she'd never divorce you, but you still let me propose. Now she's fired me. That was your goal all along, wasn't it? I pried his hand off. I was desperate for you to succeed. It would have been my ticket out of here. It had started to rain by the time I left the office. I didn't have an umbrella. A cold wind whipped rain against me, and even in my suit jacket, I felt a chill. I was just about to pull out my phone to call a car. Then I got a text. The corner. I glanced toward the intersection just ahead. Sure enough, Victoria's car was parked there. I pulled my jacket tighter and walked toward it. When we were first married, Victoria's car would be waiting for me at that corner every day. Back then, I walked this short distance of joy. Now, it felt like walking toward my own execution. The car door opened, and a hand shot out, grabbing my wrist and yanking me inside. Caught off balance, I stumbled and fell beside her, crashing hard into her shoulder. That same hand immediately clamped around my throat. She wasn't using much force, but I already felt like I couldn't breathe. Mr. Grant, don't try to be clever like Ethan again. As long as you have that face, no one can threaten your position. I gave a contemptuous sneer. You think I give a damn about this position? Maybe I used to. After all, who wouldn't want to marry the person they love? But now, this position is nothing but a mockery to me. My words enraged Victoria. She shoved me against the car window, leaned in, and whispered in my ear. You don't care, so you just give it away to someone else? You'd better give up that idea. Don't you dare try to push another man on me. She opened the glove compartment and pulled out a box. She opened it. It was a ring, identical to the one I had thrown away. Victoria grabbed my hand and started to force it on. I yanked my hand back. Her eyes went cold, and her movements became more forceful. The ring ended up on my finger anyway. You take it off, I'll put it back on. Every single time, unless you chop your own hand off. I stopped trying to remove the ring. I didn't fight back anymore. I slid to the far right side of the car, as far from Victoria as I could get. I leaned my head against the window, watching the city lights flash by. Mom and Dad called. They said they're spending the holidays in the mountains this year to be with your brother. I'm going too. You don't have to come. I felt nothing. Okay, I said. Spending the holidays alone sounded pretty good. At least it was better than a family sitting together in shared grief. My brother and I were kidnapped together. The kidnappers filmed a video to threaten our family, slicing my thigh with a knife. My brother fought back to save me. He was stabbed in the stomach. There was no medical care in the mountains. My brother didn't make it. When the police finally found us, I was too deep in shock to react. All I remember is that when they carried my brother away, he was covered with a white sheet. I had nightmares every night for a long time after that. I'd wake up and ask myself the same question. If I hadn't cried out in pain when the kidnapper's knife cut me, if I had just been quiet and brave, would my brother still be alive? But no one ever gave me an answer. They all said I was the reason he died, that he died for me. I was in the hospital for a long time before I came back to myself. My parents only visited a few times. They said seeing my face reminded them of my brother, and it was too painful. The day I was discharged, Victoria came to pick me up. I didn't know who she was or where she'd come from, but she was so gentle with me. After being rejected by my parents, I couldn't resist that kindness. I clung to it like a drowning man to a lifeline. I scrambled ashore, desperate for safety, only to find myself in an even deeper abyss. Victoria was packing when my parents called. I answered. There was a brief silence on the other end. Then my dad's voice came through. Leo, we're going to the mountains to be with your brother this year. Is there anything you want us to tell him? It felt like a hand had suddenly clamped around my throat. Took me a long moment to find my voice. No, I've already spoken to him at his grave. All right. The line went dead. I stared at the black screen, lost in thought. When my parents missed my brother, they would go to the mountain where we were kidnapped. They say a person's soul lingers where they died. I went with them once. I started shaking as we reached the foot of the mountain and passed out before I even made it halfway up. As Victoria was leaving, she reminded me, hire another assistant, a woman this time, and stop getting any funny ideas. I listened until the sound of her car's engine faded away. I went upstairs, changed, and hurried out the door. It was already getting dark by the time I reached the cemetery. But I found my brother's headstone. Brother, they all went to the mountains to be with you, so I came here to be with you. If you had been the one to survive, everyone would be happy now, wouldn't they? I'm sorry. Used to always tell you how good Victoria was to me. You must have been so angry, thinking I stole the happiness that should have been yours. I murmured to myself for a long time. Snow began to fall. It was the first snow of the year. I stood up and caught a snowflake in my palm. It melted, a cool touch in the center of my hand. I said goodbye to my brother and started walking toward the exit. I must have been lost in thought. I didn't notice a dark figure standing in the path ahead. I'm not scared at my brother's grave, but now, a strange fear crept in. My throat was dry. I asked, my voice trembling, up ahead, are you a person or a ghost? The figure turned. Her face was pale, even in the darkness. I stumbled back in a panic. A ghost! I screamed. To my surprise, the figure took a few steps toward me and stopped. It's late. Do you think you're the only living person allowed in this cemetery? I glanced at the dark tombstones all around us. I felt a draft, as if my clothes were full of holes. I looked up and saw the white mist of her breath as she spoke. That calmed me down a little. It was warm. She must be human. Having another living person around, I felt a little braver. We walked together. Neither of us spoke, a silent understanding between us. We parted ways at the cemetery gate. It was 10 o'clock by the time I got home. I took out my phone and saw I had several missed calls from Victoria. I'd put my phone on silent before I left for the cemetery, so I hadn't heard it. Was hesitating whether to call her back when she called again. This time I answered, why haven't you been answering your phone? I went to the cemetery to be with my brother. Victoria was silent for a long time. Why didn't you wait for me to get back so we could go together? My brother probably wouldn't want to see us together. And I don't want to go with you. Victoria fell silent again. Finally, she just said, get some sleep, and hung up. After all this time, I had learned how to make Victoria and me talk less. I was alone at home for the entire holiday. It was quiet and empty. Outside, festive red decorations were hung, and everyone on the street had a celebratory look on their face. I walked through the crowd, feeling like an outsider. I found a quiet little park and sat down. I tried to figure out what to do next. Victoria didn't want me to find her a male assistant, but a female one seemed even less likely to make her consider a divorce. Over the years, I'd manufactured chance encounters for Victoria, found people who looked like my brother, and even swapped her assistants to men. She didn't care about any of them. But this time, Ethan had managed to stick around for 6 months. I thought there might be a glimmer of hope, but it was still a failure. I sighed, feeling dejected. When would this life of mutual torment ever end? I hadn't found a new assistant yet, but Victoria was the one who had an accident first. When I rushed to the hospital, my parents were sitting outside a patient room. I instinctively froze. I turned and walked to the nurse's station nearby, asked for a mask, and put it on. I knew my parents didn't want to see me. I rarely went home unless I had to, and no one ever asked me to. I stopped at the door to the operating room. Victoria wasn't out yet. When they saw me, my parents' faces lit up for a moment, but they grew calm again when they saw the mask on my face. Victoria fell because she was trying to pick your brother's favorite flowers. When she gets out of surgery, you should spend more time with her. Having you and her will at least be some comfort. I stood there, stunned. I watched my mother's lips move, but I didn't hear a single word she said after that, until the door to the operating room was pushed open. The patient is out of danger. Where's the family? My mother pushed me forward. I looked at Victoria lying on the hospital bed. A terrible thought flashed through my mind. Why didn't she die? Realizing what I was thinking, I broke out in a cold sweat. A nurse next to me was explaining what to watch out for. I followed the gurney, numbly nodding my agreement. My mother went out and came back with a bouquet of wild lilies. They were my brother's favorite flower. She placed them on the nightstand next to Victoria's bed. What are you standing there for? You don't look like a husband at all. If only her words trailed off. I finished her sentence for her. If it were my brother, he would have done a better job, right? My mother looked away, uncomfortable. She used to say that words when I was a kid. Under her praise, my brother became more and more outstanding, while I was like a flower slowly withering. I became insecure and timid. My brother was the only one who would secretly find me after I'd been scolded to tears. Leo, you do a great job too. When I was your age, I wasn't as good as you. Leo, grow up fast. Sooner or later, you'll surpass me. I used to see that as my goal. But now, I had no desire to surpass my brother. My brother would be forever 23, while I had decades ahead of me to surpass him. My brother died, and everyone seemed to be drowning in grief. And I became the lucky one. In their eyes, I was the reason he lost his life. But my brother was my only salvation. I wanted him to be alive more than anyone. Victoria woke up a day later. My parents had left, leaving me at the hospital to watch over her. I glanced at her, fiddling with the wild lilies in the vase. The flowers are beautiful. They cost you a broken leg. One of Victoria's legs was fractured. She would be stuck in the hospital for a few months at least. She had just woken up, her face an unnatural white. My words made it even paler. Anything your brother liked, I'll find a way to get it for him. So, my brother wants you to torture me like this? He loved me more than anyone. If he saw you treating me this way, he'd never forgive you. Victoria closed her eyes softly. She seemed to be lost in a memory. A look of fondness crossed her face. Your brother said you were timid, but you'd still stick your claws out like a kitten when you got angry. He said you weren't to be trifled with and told me to provoke you less. If you scratched me, he wouldn't intervene. But before I even had a chance to meet you, he was already dead. Because of you, I cut her off. You think you're the only one who didn't want him to die. I wish I had been the one to die that day. I must have gotten too emotional. Victoria turned her head to look at me. A flicker of confusion appeared in her eyes, but she quickly shook her head. But you're still alive and well. I sat on the rooftop, Victoria's words echoing in my head. 3 years ago, when I'd just gotten out of the hospital, my parents had said the same thing. Leo, you're still alive, but your brother is really gone. It seemed that overnight, everyone had decided that since my brother was dead, I shouldn't be alive. The rooftop wind blew across the fresh tear tracks on my face. I walked, step by step, toward the edge of the roof. I could just see the doctors rushing out of the hospital entrance below, wheeling someone covered in blood from an ambulance. My heart trembled. If I jumped, they would wheel me into the hospital like that, too. No, they probably wouldn't even need to. I'd just die, a bloody mess on the pavement. But everyone wants me to die. Maybe dying and joining my brother is the best outcome. I took another step toward the edge. Suddenly, a force on my wrist. The world spun and I fell, landing in a soft embrace. A muffled grunt came from beneath me. If you don't get up, I'm going to be your replacement ghost. A weak female voice spoke. I scrambled to my feet. The woman sat up, clutching her chest, coughing until her face was red. I stood there, helpless. Even though I wanted to die a moment ago, I never wanted to drag someone else down with me. I'll go get a doctor for you. No need. It's an old problem of mine. It has nothing to do with you. But you fell because you were saving me. Saving you was my choice. Her voice was still unsteady, and she spoke in fits and starts. She coughed for a while before her breathing finally calmed. This hospital rooftop is never short on people wanting to die. What, you have a terminal illness too? I bit my lip, finding it hard to speak. No. If you don't have a terminal illness, why do you want to die? Maybe because I'm the one who's supposed to be dead. Confusion appeared in her eyes. Did you kill someone? Or commit arson? I shook my head repeatedly. I don't know why, but with this stranger, I suddenly had the urge to open up. I told her about me and my brother. She listened intently the whole time, never interrupting. Only at the end did she ask, so, you think you deserve to die too? I looked at her, stunned. I didn't think so at first. My brother saved me because he didn't want me to die. He definitely wanted me to live a good life. But no one except me wanted me to live a good life. Maybe for them, my suffering could help them find some peace with my brother's death. Your brother saving you, just like me saving you just now, was his own choice. If you were truly on the brink of death, you'd understand that you should just stay away from people who make you unhappy. It's not worth giving up your life just to make them feel at peace. Every single person in this hospital fighting for their life wishes for a healthy body. You have one. You should cherish it. I blinked, noticing her face was getting paler. A memory came in. You're the person from the cemetery that night? I exclaimed. She coughed violently. I quickly covered my mouth. Wait, the person who was at the cemetery. She stood up and glanced over the edge of the rooftop. I hope I don't have to be your stand-in casualty again. She walked slowly toward the stairwell. I learned her name, Lily. When Victoria saw me return, she frowned. What took you so long? A caregiver had already helped her with her checkup. 2 untouched meals sat on the table. The caregiver came forward and opened the meal containers. Ms. Lynch was waiting for you to come back to eat with her, sir. Victoria's face flushed slightly. You can go now that it's set up. I didn't have much of an appetite, but Lily's words from the rooftop echoed in my mind. I ended up eating some of the food. Victoria was flipping through a file, asking casually, have you found a new assistant yet? So much had happened recently I hadn't had time to find her one. She was clearly wary of any assistant I found. I don't know why she still insisted on giving me this task. Not yet. Then you can just handle the assistant's duties for now. You have to come to the hospital every day anyway. I remained silent. Although my parents had told me to take good care of Victoria, the hospital had caregivers and doctors. My presence was useless. I had no intention of coming every day. As if sensing my reluctance, Victoria put down her documents.
I'm hospitalized.
Mr. Grant, if you don't even visit the hospital, wouldn't that look a little strange? No one knows I'm Mr. Grant. If they laugh, they'll only be laughing at you, Ms. Lynch. Victoria looked at me, deep in thought. Are you angry that I didn't make our relationship public? When we first got married, it was Victoria who said she didn't want to publicize our relationship, citing the company's no-dating policy. Later, there was a time she wanted to take me to a banquet. It would have been a soft launch of our relationship. But I refused. By then, I already knew about her and my brother. Our marriage was a sham. I didn't care whether it was public or not. I'd be happier if Ms. Lynch were willing to announce our divorce.
Victoria es nered.
It seems you haven't given up on the idea of divorce. To Victoria, me wanting a divorce was probably a very foolish decision. Even if she didn't give them a title, there were plenty of men willing to stand by her side. Yet for years I had been trying everything to divorce her. I must have seemed incredibly ungrateful. I took out the divorce agreement I had prepared long ago. Just as Victoria was about to tear it up, I said, if you tear it, I'll just print another one. Victoria tossed the agreement aside. She didn't even glance at it. Leo, your stubbornness is exhausting sometimes. You're nothing like your brother. My hand, reaching for my bag, froze. I smiled faintly. Being hated by you is an honor. I ignored Victoria's teeth-grinding expression and turned to walk out the door. With her leg injured, I felt a little emboldened. Just as the door was about to close, her voice came from behind. Leo, can't you just stop this and we go back to how we were before? I pretended not to hear. I shut the door, blocking out Victoria's face. When I was first rescued and lying in the hospital, only Victoria was there for me. Later, after I was discharged, when she said she wanted to build a life with me, I was swept away by emotion. I agreed without a second thought. I didn't dare to question why she had suddenly appeared, why she was so good to me, or why my parents didn't object to me marrying this stranger product of nowhere. At that time, I was just too desperate for someone police's be by my side. We were happy for the first year of our marriage. Victoria was very good to me. She would wait for me to get off work every day, and we'd go home together. She was always finding excuses to surprise me. Because of the trauma. From the kidnapping, I often had nightmares. She personally learned how to make calming herbal soups for me. That brief period of indulgence has already cost me dearly. I won't make the same mistake twice. Victoria was in the hospital, and I was temporarily acting as her assistant. Many people at the company came to me for information. Why is Ms. Lynch suddenly in the hospital? And her previous assistant, Ethan, got fired. Ethan has been coming to the company trying to see Ms. Lynch. You don't think she's just saying she's in the hospital to avoid him, do you? So they've really broken up for good this time? Does that mean we have a chance again? I organized the files in my hand and glanced at them. Ms. Lynch said she wants a female assistant this time. You guys probably don't have a chance. Their faces immediately fell. Youth is a wonderful thing, always so full of hope when it comes to love. Someone with sharp eyes noticed the ring on my hand. Mr. Grant, your ring? When did you get married? I instinctively covered the ring with my other hand. I'd meant to take it off secretly later that day, but I'd forgotten. I just wear it. But that ring looks kind of familiar. It looks like it's part of a set with the one Ms. Lynch used to wear. Several pairs of eyes scanned me up and down. Mr. Grant, you and Ms. Lynch aren't. I cut them off. Stop your wild guessing. Why would I have anything to do with Ms. Lynch? That's true. Every time you two meet, you're both more serious than the other. You really don't seem like you have a connection. I praised them for their keen observation. They left, laughing and joking. I went down to the parking garage. The moment I sat in the driver's seat, I knew something was wrong. I tried to get out, but the car door was slammed shut from the outside. At the same time, a knife was pressed against my neck. My ears were ringing, and my vision swam with black spots. Before I passed out, I heard the person holding the knife behind me say in surprise, I haven't even used the chloroform and he passed out on his own? When I woke up, it was pitch black. As expected, my hands were tied. I never thought I'd be kidnapped a second time in my life. I kicked something next to me, making a clattering noise. A door not far away opened, letting in a sliver of light. A man stood silhouetted against it. Click. The room's light flickered on. It illuminated a familiar face. It was Ethan. I remembered my coworkers saying Ethan had been coming to the company every day, but he hadn't been able to see Victoria. I had a pretty good idea of his motive for kidnapping me. He probably just wanted Victoria to see him. He likely wouldn't harm me. The terror in my eyes subsided into calm. Ethan squatted down in front of me. Where is Ms. Lynch? The hospital. Ethan was surprised by my cooperation. He asked eagerly, why won't she see me? You should ask her yourself. She won't see me. She's avoiding me. She doesn't want me anymore, Ethan started muttering. To himself, his eyes losing focus. He seemed mentally unstable. I blinked. I have a way to get Victoria back together with you. Ethan's eyes instantly lit up. He looked at me with hope. What is it? Use me to threaten her into divorcing me. Then I'll find a way to get you back as her assistant. Ethan looked at me like I'd told a joke. Threaten her with you? She doesn't even like you. You're just coasting on a face she happens to like. How could she be threatened by me? Then his expression turned gloomy again. Besides, she said you'll be Mr. Grant until the day you die. Just try. What have you got to lose? Maybe she'll agree. Ethan frowned, seeming to consider it. A few minutes later, he left without a word. I wasn't sure if Ethan would take my suggestion, but I was making a bet. A bet that Victoria wouldn't want anything to happen to me. In her mind, I was the one who got her brother killed, but in a way, I was also the one living in his place. When Ethan came back in, his face was alight with joy. She agreed. She actually agreed. But then he looked at me with resentment. Doesn't she dislike you? Why would she agree? Does she care about you? How can she care about you? She's only supposed to care about me. I tried to make myself as small as possible, not wanting to draw Ethan's attention. When footsteps sounded at the door, Ethan ran out joyfully. Victoria appeared in the doorway. She was holding the divorce agreement I had left with her. She looked past Ethan into the room. "Where's Leo?" she asked in a low voice. Ethan's expression suddenly changed. "Don't mention him. You're divorcing him. Did you fall for him? Is that why you don't want me anymore?" Victoria glanced at the frenzied Ethan. She tried to rush in to find me, but Ethan was faster. I don't know when he got a knife, but in a few steps he was in front of me, pressing it to the side of my face. His voice was almost hysterical. "You're not allowed to love him. You just love this face. If this face is gone..." A sharp pain shot through my left cheek. I felt a warm liquid trickle down. I saw the shock and horror in Victoria's eyes. The last time I held a knife to my own face, she was so calm. So that was all an act. I knew it. She couldn't bear to lose this face that looked so much like my brother's. The people Victoria brought with her broke through a window. They subdued Ethan. She rushed over and cradled me in her arms. The doctor sighed repeatedly while treating my wound. Thankfully, the cut isn't too large, but it's a bit deep. There's a high chance it will leave a scar. But medical technology is very good now. After a few treatments and with makeup, you won't be able to see it. I listened to the doctor, my face blank. I didn't care if it left a scar or not. After the doctor finished and left, Victoria knelt in front of me. "Don't be scared. I won't let you have a scar." I lowered my eyes and looked at her. A scar would be fine. It would make me look less like my brother. Victoria's eyes trembled. In the end, she said nothing. Victoria's people handed Ethan over to the police. He had mental health issues, but kidnapping was a crime he couldn't escape jail time for. I heard that in prison, he kept shouting that he wanted to see Victoria. But she never went, not once. I sat on the hospital bed, looking out the window. It was already early spring. Soon, it would be time to go out and enjoy the flowers. The nurse had already gone to find Victoria. She pushed open the door, frowning, but she deliberately lowered her voice. "Why didn't you let the nurse apply the ointment? I want to keep the scar." Victoria, with uncharacteristic patience, sat down on the edge of my bed. "Don't say things you don't mean. Everyone treasures their face. You'll regret it later if you keep it. The only thing I regret now is marrying you." A flash of anger crossed Victoria's face, but she suppressed it. "What will it take for you to cooperate with the treatment? Finalize the divorce with me?" She had already signed the divorce agreement, but the legal process wasn't complete. Victoria was silent for a few seconds. Finally, she gave in. During the cooling-off period, I cooperated with all my treatments. I don't know what got into Victoria. She started taking care of me with the same attentiveness she had when we first met. For the past few years, we'd been at odds, our relationship far from harmonious. Her newfound tenderness no longer moved me like it used to. It just felt awkward. Often slipped away to the rooftop when she came to the hospital to avoid her. Lily liked to read up there. Sometimes she would read, and I would sit quietly beside her. Neither of us felt the need to talk much. She never asked how I got the scar on my face, and I never asked about her increasingly pale complexion. The day the cooling-off period ended, I proactively reminded Victoria. She paused for a moment, but eventually, she took me to get the divorce certificate. Coming out of City Hall, she asked me like she was placating a child. "Are you happy now?" I ignored her. "Leo, my reasons for marrying you weren't pure. Can we start over? When Ethan threatened you that day, that was the first time I felt the panic of losing you. I think, maybe I don't hate you that much." I slowly turned my head to look at her. "But I hate you now, and I feel even worse for my brother." I took off the ring she had put on my finger. The same motion, a flash of white light, and the ring landed in a trash can. It was too late for Victoria to stop me. Her expression darkened. Leo, we both need to move forward. I was the one stuck in the past. From now on, I'll talk to Mom and Dad more, help them move on. Victoria, we're divorced. They're not your mom and dad anymore. I went home. My parents froze when they saw the scar on my face. What happened? I accidentally cut myself. My mother slammed a glass down. How can you be so careless? You've been useless your whole life. You're a grown man and you still managed to injure your face. They didn't care if I was in pain. They were just upset that a scar made me look less like my brother. Well, this is perfect. Now you don't have to look at me to remember him. My existence won't make you sad anymore. My voice was cold, as if I were stating an unrelated fact. My mother, furious, stormed into her room. The living room felt empty. Without my brother, this house had even less of a human touch. As I left, I felt a strange sense of calm. I suddenly thought of what Lily said. Some love isn't worth forcing. They had never loved me, not since I was little. After my brother died, they were even less likely to love me. If no one around me loves me, then I'll just have to love myself. I bought a plane ticket. My destination was a place where spring was in full bloom. Lily said it had the bluest skies, the freshest air, and the gentlest wind. Just before boarding, I received a message from Victoria. There's some trouble at the company. Be a good boy and stay at the hospital for your treatment. I'll come see you when I'm free. I blocked her number and turned off my phone. While Victoria was hospitalized, I had already been planning the divorce. I was the one who created the problems at the company. The whole point was to keep her too busy to bother me after the divorce. I just hadn't anticipated Ethan's appearance, which made everything go even more smoothly. Walking out of the airport, I saw Lily waiting for me not far away. The courtyard, where Lily was recuperating, was large. For her, being here wasn't much different from being in the hospital. She spent her days with a book in her hands, but her complexion had more life in it than it did at the hospital. Lily, your medicine. I placed a bowl of herbal medicine in front of her. I watched, frowning, as she picked it up and drank it all without a change in expression. How long have you been drinking this? You're not going to be on it for the rest of your life, are you? Lily smiled. It won't be that long. I won't be drinking it for much longer. Lily had a doctor who came and went, checking on her occasionally. One time I was passing by. She caught me. Lily pulled me in front of the doctor. See if there's anything you can do to get rid of the scar on his face. I waved my hands frantically. I don't need it. The scar doesn't bother me. I'm used to it. But Lily insisted. You are your own person. You think a scar is what separates you from your brother. That only works if you're the one treating yourself as his stand-in. In the end, the doctor examined my scar. After drinking her medicine each day, Lily had a new task. She would rub ointment on my scar. Sometimes I'd get messages from my parents. They'd ask where I was, saying Victoria was looking for me. Not once did they say they missed me. I just replied that I was fine. Away from the people who made me unhappy, my life was filled with only happy things. Lily, when summer comes, will your cough get better? We can go to the cemetery together then. I knew the cemetery where my brother was buried also held someone important to Lily. That's why she'd go to visit even in the coldest weather of the new year. Lily glanced at me, but she didn't answer. After several treatments, the scar on my face finally disappeared. Only a faint pink mark remained. The doctor said it would be unnoticeable after a while. I ran excitedly toward the courtyard where Lily usually read. Lily, look, my scar is gone. Lily was lying on a chaise lounge under a tree. I walked closer. Her eyes were closed, a book resting on her stomach. Her skin was so pale that the blue veins on her hands were clearly visible. I called her name. No response. I don't know why, but a wave of panic washed over me. I suddenly burst into tears, my eyes turning red, my voice choking. But she was so quiet, as if she were just asleep. Lily, wake up. Look, my scar is gone. The doctor said it will be invisible soon. You were the one who wanted me to heal my scar. You have to wake up and see it. My voice was nearly hysterical. I was loud enough to wake the dead. But I never heard Lily open her eyes and tell me to be quiet. The tears fell faster, beyond my control. Lily, please wake up. I'm begging you. Don't sleep yet. I'm still waiting to take you to see my brother. If my brother finds out you're a sleepyhead, he won't like you. I sat on the ground, rambling nonsensically. I didn't know what I was trying to say, only that I had to keep talking, as if that could wake her up. A cool breeze blew past, and the cold sweat on my back made me shiver. I scrambled up from the ground and ran out of the courtyard. I half-dragged, half-pulled the doctors to Lily. Look at her. You've been treating her, haven't you? How could she suddenly be sleeping so soundly? Is her condition worse? Write a new prescription, I'll go brew the medicine right now. They exchanged glances. One doctor stepped forward and placed his fingers on Lily's carotid artery. I was shaking uncontrollably, muttering, "No, it can't be." The doctor looked at me with pity and sighed. "Mr. Grant, we were called here to treat you. Miss Lynn probably understood her own illness better than any of us. She's passed away. Please accept our condolences." The giant boulder that had been hanging over my heart crashed down. I froze. I looked numbly at Lily on the chaise lounge. She looked no different from any other day. There was even a faint blush on her cheeks, making her look quite well. A nearly dry teardrop clung to the corner of her eye. She must have been coughing before. Every time she coughed, her face would flush red. I always used to tease her, saying she'd secretly put on blush. But how did I not hear her coughing this time? If I had heard, I could have rushed over and at least seen her one last time. "Lily, summer is almost here. When the weather gets better, you won't cough anymore, right? My brother is still waiting for me to introduce you. I wonder if you two have already met. Just tell him that you and he are the two kindest people to me in this world. My brother will definitely look out for you. If we ever meet again, and you have a healthy body, please don't reject me again." I buried a ring woven from grass and a silver ring in front of her grave. I had been weeding in the courtyard one day. On a whim, I wove the grass into a ring and gave it to her. Lily was clearly happy, but she took it off as soon as she put it on. "Leo, do you know what giving a ring means? You're supposed to give it to the person who can spend a lifetime with you. And that's not me." Later, when the grass ring withered, I made a silver one by hand. Of course, I knew what giving a ring meant, but before I could give it to her, Lily's life withered, just like that grass ring. I held up my hand, which wore a matching ring, and wiggled my fingers. "See, I have one too. This ring won't wither. It will last forever." A breeze rustled past. The late spring wind was as gentle as Lily, with no trace of coldness left. My phone suddenly rang. It was my parents. They had never called me after I left. This was the first time. I answered. "Leo, Victoria's in the hospital. You need to come back." What does her being in the hospital have to do with me? My mother's voice on the phone suddenly turned furious. "How does it not have to do with you? It's all because you wanted a divorce. Victoria got in a car accident on her way to find you. Wasn't it enough that you killed your brother? Do you have to kill her too?" If I had heard such an accusation before, I might have been hurt, sad. But now, their words couldn't stir a single ripple in my heart. I've grown up. I'm no longer the little boy who needed his brother's comfort to stop doubting himself. My voice was cold. If she dies, good. She can go keep my brother company. I hung up before they could say another word. I wiped the headstone, tilting my head up with a bit of pride. Look how strong I am now. I won't let them hurt me anymore. The people in this world who could break my heart are all gone. But I'm still going to live a good life. You and my brother would be happy to see me like this, right? No one answered. But I knew they would be. Lily's story the first time I met Leo, he was trembling in fear of me. My complexion was probably so pale I could have passed for a ghost. I felt bad about that. The second time we met, I saved him from taking his own life. He almost made me a real ghost. Because of my poor health since childhood, my only hobby over the years has been reading medical books. I sensed he had depression. I tried to comfort him. He shared his story with me. He had yearned for his family's love, lost the brother who adored him, and been betrayed in his marriage. For a moment, I didn't know which of us was more tragic. I was surprised by the sudden wave of sympathy I felt. What right did I have to pity anyone else? I myself didn't know how much time I had left, but I still told him my name. I just wanted to know him. The next time I saw him, he had a scar on his face. I didn't dare ask. I was afraid that knowing too much would only make me pity him more. I could tell he was hiding from someone. Every afternoon, I waited for him on the rooftop. He never disturbed me. He just sat there in silence. We kept each other company, yet we were like strangers. When I left, I told him I was going to a place where spring was in full bloom. I thought that would be the last time we'd see each other. I never expected to get a message from him. I never thought I would get used to another person's presence. Being reminded to take my medicine every day, listening to him ask about the books I was reading, eating meals with him. The most ordinary things in life suddenly seemed interesting. He was squatting in the courtyard, pulling weeds. When he turned around, he suddenly produced a ring woven from grass. The ring lay quietly in his palm. He said nothing, but my heart started to pound uncontrollably. I think I was hoping for something I had no right to hope for. "Lily, I'm giving you a ring." His voice was in my ears. It was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. A warm touch brushed against my finger, and the ring was on. I looked at the ring and my eyes grew hot. Was this a proposal? To be proposed to before I die, that's a happy occasion, right? I still gave the ring back to him. He was a little disappointed, but I couldn't give him hope. He still had decades polices of time. He would meet other people, fall in love, and forget me. He would live a happy life. The doctor told me his scar was almost healed. I was so happy. He always said he was most afraid of his brother worrying about him. This way, he could go see his brother looking his best. He went with the doctor for his treatment. He was so happy when he left. I waited for him, reading my book. But before he could come back, I started to cough. I tried to keep my voice down. I didn't want him to worry, but this time it seemed especially difficult. As I coughed, black spots swam before my eyes. I collapsed back onto the chaise lounge, exhausted. Flashes of our time together flickered before my eyes. My dull and short life, the only vivid chapter. I should never have hoped that these good days could last forever. But at least I, a dying person, got to save someone who wasn't supposed to die. That's something. As long as he lives a good life. If there's a next life, I hope I get to be the one to live it out with him.